I just wanted to start through you, Madam Chairman, by just talking about the striking workers portion of the bill more than anything. I think that we could have a conversation that goes on for many, many moons. That's not my intent here today. So I'm going to stick just to the striking workers part. Maybe some of my colleagues can delve into the warehouse workers portion of the bill, which I do also have some concerns with. I guess I would start by asking the question, because this bill effectively is going to utilize the unemployment compensation fund, or unemployment insurance for when people lose their jobs, there is a fund set up for people to have access to collect unemployment. Since we're going to be using that fund to effectively include striking workers after a 2-week period that they've been on strike, maybe you can just share with me, how does this fit into the current construct of what unemployment compensation is for? Through you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sampson, and through you, Madam Chair. I think it is entirely appropriate to put this under the rubric of unemployment compensation, because what we were saying earlier is that when workers are on strike, they are not really voluntarily on strike. And that is what unemployment compensation is usually about, when people are unemployed against their will, and with something that was not a choice they would have chosen to make. And it seems to me that this is a reasonable public policy choice to assist workers who are going to be otherwise facing potential financial extremists, and it also means, I think, that will help settle strikes earlier, so that there'll be additional pressure to come to the table and get things done within the 2 weeks, I think, for manufacturers or for employers who will not want to have their unemployment insurance rating affected by having it continue on during a strike. I think it'll focus the mind and help strikes longer than 2 weeks be fewer in number than they are now. They are relatively few now, so there aren't that many strikes that go on longer than 2 weeks. But I think we'll have even fewer when this bill passes.
Through you, through you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate that answer, Senator Looney, and frankly, I disagree. But of course, this is not a place for us to necessarily debate the issue, and I'm going to try and focus on just simply asking you questions. You just stated, and you had stated in your opening statement, no one willingly strikes. And but it's still a choice. No, doesn't that ultimate decision have to be made by that employee? At the end of the day, there are other options. I mean, and a strike only happens after there is an attempt at a negotiation, so that that negotiation could continue, or there could be an agreement to settle for whatever terms are being negotiated or offered by the employer. Someone could find other employment. I mean, there are a lot of other options. I mean, to say that no one willingly strikes, I mean, to say they don't want to actually strike, they'd rather just have things go their way and get the benefits that they're seeking from the employer, of course. But it's still a choice. I really want to clarify that, because I mean, I think it's an important and key point to this entire discussion, to suggest that people are not making their own choice when they go on strike. I just don't think is accurate.
Well, with all due respect, Senator, I think that point of view reflects the attitude that existed in the U.S. Supreme Court many decades ago, when they were focused on the idea of unions and other kind of labor laws interfering with the free bargaining power between employers and employees. And they used that argument in some cases to strike down child labor laws, basically saying, well, that 8-year-old kid has the right to negotiate whether or not he's going to go to work or not at that age, and it's up to him, and it's a choice. So ignoring the inequality of positioning and bargaining power between the two, and I think this is another example of that. There is willingly and there is willingly, and I think that what we're talking about here is that the true range of free options that people might choose have usually been considered, and people are at the end of the rope in terms of a lengthy negotiation before they undertake something that they know will be financially costly to them ultimately. That they're they're likely to, because they're going to go at least the 2 weeks without pay. It's going to take a while to catch up on that, even if they get a decent contract afterwards.
Can I just jump in too? Let's take the Stop and Shop for example, right? They had the owners there earn millions of dollars a year. The cash register folks probably earn maybe, I don't know, back then maybe $15 an hour, $17 an hour. Would that be accurate? Who's going to have more skin in the game to wait? It would be the employer, because they don't care. They'll wait it out until the employees are so desperate they have to accept anything. Again, it's a level playing field for both parties to reach an agreement. And if you have an employer who has the means to be able to wait it out, they'll wait it out so long that it won't matter for them. The ones who will suffer will be our neighbors, the employees, the ones who show up to work every day, the ones who send their kids to the same schools that we do, the ones who we say hi to when we see them in a neighborhood.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and through you. Respectfully, gentlemen, we're not talking about 8-year-olds and child labor, and we're not talking about millionaires necessarily. I don't know the owners of Stop and Shop personally. I don't know whether they're millionaires or not. That's got little to do with this conversation, and to try and make it a battle between, people of lesser means versus millionaires, I think is missing the point. The fact of the matter is that if you enable people to go on strike and give them extra tools to stay on strike longer and demand more, all of those costs get passed on to our neighbors that we pass on the street too. So, I mean, you can't leave that out of the equation. And I'm really just trying to talk about policy here. I understand there's a desire to inject national politics and maybe some class warfare into things. I'm just trying to get to the meat of whether this makes sense as a policy. And I asked the first question because to be eligible for unemployment in the state of Connecticut, you've got to meet 3 characteristics. 1, you have to be not working through no choice of your own. So that's where the question comes from. In my view, maybe people don't want to go on strike, but at the end of the day, it's their choice. We can suggest that they aren't willingly doing it, but it's still their choice. The second aspect is you have to be ready and able to work. And somebody who's standing outside refusing to work is not ready and able to work. And then the third requirement to be eligible for unemployment compensation is that you have to be looking for work. And clearly, if you're on a picket line, you're not looking for work. So whether or not we want to benefit people that are striking, that is a different story from what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, how do we justify benefiting people who are striking at the expense of the unemployment compensation fund, which is for an entirely different group of people, people that are not working through no fault of their own, who want to work and are able and ready to work and looking for work?
Through you, Madam Chair. First of all, I think the idea of attributing fault to people who are on strike is erroneous. It's not their fault that they're on strike. Usually the fault is because of the intransigence of the employer's position, because the other position, the implications of what you're saying, Senator, is that, well, if they just have to collapse and accept the last offer the employer makes, regardless if they want to avoid being on strike. And that, again, undermines the equality of a bargaining position. Now, we all know that there are public employees who can't strike, and that's why we've given them the right to have compulsory binding arbitration as a substitute for the right to strike. But for private sector workers, the right to strike is really the only leveler they have to try to get to a reasonable contract. And by limiting their exposure to being without income to 2 weeks, we think it will facilitate settlements, and also, in the long run, if a better contract results from that, those people will be able to pay higher rents. And we talked about at the committee earlier today in the Housing Committee how high rents are going. People will be able to afford their rents, be able to afford eggs in the grocery store, and be able to afford all of the other things that are rising at a spiraling rate better than they could before that contract is settled. In our own family, as a child, I knew our standard of living increased significantly after there was a union contract in place at Winchester's, and even more so after the second contract that came into place after the union was voted in. So I think in the broad spectrum of the economy, this bill is something that helps build up capacity in people.
Let me also just say, I remember with the Stop and Shop strike that the last best offer from the employer was to take away health insurance and pensions from certain workers. How that helps our employees, I don't know. It doesn't. After the strike, what happened? That was reversed. And people were able to still keep their health care and their retirement. So there is leverage for striking. There needs to be some sort of leveler, as Senator Looney's talking about, and that's the way in which we can make sure that we're taking care of our neighbors. Madam Chair, I apologize. I have to run to another committee to testify. Senator Looney is more than capable of taking all of this without me here, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us today. And I do know, I'm assuming that you have further questions. Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Enjoy the afternoon, Senator Duff. Senator Looney, just following up on the previous round of comments. One thing is, I never attributed fault to anyone. I just want to clarify that. I said choice, not fault. It's ultimately the choice of someone to go on strike. And I understand that Senator Duff would like to make this all about where I'm protecting the little people, and that's what I'm doing here. And I'd just like to ask you maybe a more general policy question. Is that our role here? Is our job to take sides between employers and employees? Or should we be attempting to try and find policy that means that all people are treated fairly under the law? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Sampson. I think that goes to the heart of the difference between us. I think your position is that the law should probably tilt a little bit more to the employer side because they're the ones that provide jobs, or maybe not. Maybe that's putting the thumb on the scale a little bit too much, and maybe you're just saying the law should be absolutely neutral between the two and not make a judgment. My view is that the law should tilt to the side of the workers, but not to the point where it is so punitive to the employers that it damages their capacity to operate and to provide jobs for those workers. So that's I think where we differ. I think that the benefit of the doubt should go toward assisting the workers up to the point where it becomes so punitive to the employers that it becomes self-defeating.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate that answer and that honesty, and I am indeed in the belief that there should be no weight on the scale for either party. Mm-hmm. There should certainly be protections in the law to protect workers against unsafe working conditions and environment safety protocols, et cetera. But when it comes to a negotiation, I believe actually in the case of collectively bargained union negotiations that the employees actually do have the advantage. Effectively, they can shut down the business completely. I mean, historically there have been companies that have been put out of business effectively because of ongoing collective bargaining, putting the company in a position where it was no longer solvent. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I respect that you see that some weight on the scale might be beneficial. I'm not blind. I want to make sure that people on both sides of the negotiation are protected, and certainly I want to make sure that workers do not lose their benefits and so forth. But I do believe that it is not the role of our state government to interject ourselves in a way that actually does unlevel the playing field. So to that point, you and Senator Duff both said repeatedly that you're trying to level the playing field, and I'm just trying to get my head around that because this bill certainly doesn't level the playing field. This puts the thumb very, very heavily on the side of employees who are collectively bargaining by suggesting that somehow they can go beyond 2 weeks now without losing a significant amount of pay, so that they can prolong a strike, and to put more pressure on an employer. You said that you think that this will shorten the length of strikes. I don't know anyone who can look at this policy and suggest that that's likely to happen. I don't even think the people advocating for it would fail to admit that this is going to give them a tool to prolong the period. So please fill me in on how you perceive that somehow writing a policy that gives a benefit to one side of a negotiation is leveling the playing field. Through you, Madam Chairman.
I think it's leveling the playing field if you believe, as I do, that the field is not level now, and you are making it more so by adopting this provision. And that's how it's leveling the playing field. And I think that a pragmatic employer now is more likely to make a deal, before the strike begins, rather than letting them go on strike at all. I think that's likely to be resolved. I think we may see fewer strikes overall, as well as fewer that go beyond 2 weeks.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And through you once again, I appreciate the answer and the candor. Senator Looney, I certainly know that you are somebody that is very consistent in your views and it doesn't back down from a debate on policy. I guess we have a difference of agreement on how to interpret what providing a benefit is or what a level playing field might be. And I don't disagree that I think that it may, in fact, require employers to have a second thought about allowing a labor dispute to result in a strike because they realize that it could be extremely damaging. And clearly that's the intent of the legislation, is to make employers understand that a strike can disable them in such a big way to provide more leverage to the employees that are bargaining. So I was going to ask a question about whether you anticipate incentivizing workers to go on strike, and I understand your position is that this is going to incentivize employers to roll over sooner.
Or settle sooner. I'll say that.
Settle. I mean, you guys used the term roll over when it was the employees before. So let me just ask this further question, which is, are you aware of the financial situation of our unemployment compensation or unemployment insurance fund through you, Madam Chairman?
Yes, I am. It is obviously there are times when the fund is in deficit, times that we've had to borrow from the federal government.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm going to try and find this information. Somebody advised me this morning that we are actually the most indebted state. I don't know if that's true, but I know we're certainly in the top few if we're not first. That's a concern of mine. Those costs are being passed on to employers. Yet another burden that is going to be on the other side of the equation. And again, I'll keep repeating that while this may seem like, it's one side benefiting the employers versus the employees, everything that is passed on to employers gets passed on to consumers. Everything. If they end up having to pay more for labor, or they have to pay more for strikes, or they have to pay more for unemployment insurance, they're going to obviously pass that on to consumers. I imagine that would drive up the cost of eggs further also. So since we are at the very top of indebtedness in the case of unemployment insurance, do you have a concern about expanding the pool of people that can access those benefits, particularly when as I mentioned, the definition of a striking worker is completely counter to what normally would be required to get benefits. Through you, Madam Chairman.
Well, again, to go back to the earlier discussion, I think that if this law is in place, there would be fewer strikes and probably less access to unemployment after 2 weeks. So most employers would be able to avoid a hit on their rating by settling in a timely way.
Senator Sampson.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and thank you for that answer. Certainly, I'm sure our conversation during the committee meeting in particular is going to turn to the impact on our economy and the insurance fund and so forth. Mm-hmm. Can I just ask you another question? So what happened last year? I remember we had this bill in the committee, very similar proposal, and it did pass out of committee. I can't remember. I remember debating the good chairman on this subject. I don't know if it was last year or the year before that we actually had the Senate debate. I feel like we didn't debate it in the Senate the first time around for the committee bill. But we did end up getting that bill on the final night of session. And that was a much different animal. That bill was less about unemployment compensation and just giving the comptroller, a stack of money, $300 million, kind of to do what he wishes with it. Can I just ask, how that came about? What is the difference with how we're approaching this with unemployment versus just giving the comptroller this money to enhance the strike funds of unions, for example? Through you, Madam Chair.
As you know, Senator, that was that version of it was a House construct. We in the Senate were pushing the bill similar to what we have here today, straightforward bill having to do with the issue of allowing workers to be eligible for unemployment. The House bill, as I understand it, instead tried to alter it by setting up, as you said, a separate fund for the controller outside of the unemployment fund. But at the same time, it also didn't actually mention striking workers as a potential beneficiary. It mentioned workers in general or labor in general. So it was somewhat opaque. I'll put it that way.
Just for the record, I think you said that we were going to hand over $300 million. I think it was $3 million, just for clarification purposes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that clarification. $3 million is still a lot of money to me, and I think most of the people in the room, but I completely understand about the correction, and we do want to get things correct. So that's a very interesting topic, because it's kind of something, the last thing I want to talk to you about really, which is, unions have strike funds. They collect dues, and they use that money for a lot of different purposes. But one of the things that they do is they keep that money in an account just in case, the workers make a decision to go on strike, and they have a way to offset their expenses and help provide, some money to the folks. And I think that's a good thing. That's a benefit that unions do provide. I guess my concern is that, if you are going to use the unemployment insurance fund as a mechanism to compensate folks, doesn't that open up the unions to use their strike fund money for other purposes?
I think that would be a choice of the union. I think it might mean that they could give workers more of a higher percentage of their pay during the first 2 weeks before then the eligibility for unemployment kicks in, and then they would, of course, have the option of perhaps of supplementing the unemployment during the duration of the strike if it went beyond 2 weeks.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a final question, assuming it doesn't prompt another conversation. I guess, Mike, I want to just ask you about Governor Lamont, I guess, because he was very outspoken last session about not supporting this policy concept, and ultimately he did veto even the version that we just discussed with the comptroller. And I assume that he shares my view on this subject, which is great. I mean, I don't know how often Governor Lamont and I agree on things, but this might be one where there's a concern about the solvency of the unemployment insurance, and also really sending a message to businesses that here in Connecticut, we're going to come up with some policies that really are counterproductive for you. Senator Harding, I think he used the term unwelcome mat at last year, which I thought was appropriate. And do you foresee Governor Lamont supporting this legislation? I mean, we're going to have some really good debates on this. I suspect that the debate in this committee is going to go on for quite some time on this subject. We've barely scratched the surface, and then we're going to take up a lot of time in the Senate. I just kind of, if Governor Lamont's on board, I suppose I got to put up more of a fight. But if he's not, maybe I don't have to worry so much. What's your feeling about the likelihood that this actually passes anyway? Through you, Madam Chairman.
Well, through you, Madam Chair, I'm quite hopeful that it will ultimately pass. And issues, as everyone knows, get connected to other issues, even if they are not necessarily substantially the same in terms of content and policy, but they often get linked. And there are things that one group wants, that another group wants, and another group doesn't want, and then suddenly a package is created that results in something going through because it gives the various competing constituencies something of what they want. So that process has not even begun yet regarding this bill. So I don't think your question could be answered probably for another 3 months.